Can I nominate Councillor David Williams?
Thank you, Councillor
Yeah,
Parrish.
can I second that?
I second.
Can I second that, please?
Thank you, members. I'll now hand
I
over.
second it as well, Lee. Yeah.
Thank you, members. I'll now hand over to Councillor Williams to carry on chairing the meeting.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Again, I think perhaps before I start, I'd obviously like to extend my best wishes for a swift recovery to the regular chair, Councillor Stuart Ashley, sentiments I'm sure everybody here would share. Thank you. So I'd like to welcome everyone to this hybrid meeting of the Cross-Cutting Resources and Business Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which is open to the press and public. This meeting is able to be viewed live by members of the press and public today. Therefore, I welcome anyone who may be watching remotely. We welcome the use of the Welsh language at meetings, but we have had no requests for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. Please can members refrain from using the chat function and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you want to speak. We'll all be keeping an eye open for hands, so that should be fine. May I remind members that as per statutory guidance made under Section 4 of the Local Government Wales Measure 2011 and our formally adopted hybrid meeting policy, any member attending a meeting remotely must be able to be seen and heard by the members and officers who are attending the meeting, as well as by members of the public viewing the meeting. So can I ask that you all please use your cameras for the duration of the meeting? I would advise that we do have a considerable number of officers here in the meeting, so just to reiterate that point. Please remember to keep your microphone muted when you are not talking, and I think we can then move on to the start of the meeting, item 1, which is attendance. I think Democratic Services officers have made a note of attendance. Is that correct? Yep. Okay. Which moves us on to then apologies.
Chair, could I just add that Giles Davis is unable to attend due to work commitments.
Oh, thank you. Yep. Because I was just going to go on to apologies. So, Niall, we've had that one. Any others?
Yes, Chair. We've obviously received apologies from Councillor Ashley, but also Councillor Liam Cowles as well.
Okay. Thank you. So we move on, please, to item number 2, which are the declarations of interest. Rebecca, have we had any declaration?
Thank you, Chair. I haven't received any declarations in advance, so just to draw members' attention, the substantive item being scrutinised today is the initial revenue estimates. So if you have any declarations, can you please verbally declare them now, or if you think of anything during the course of discussions, if you can raise them at the time, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. So we move on to item 3, which is a confirmation of minutes of the 10th of the 10th, 2023, and those minutes start on page 3. I'll assume that if there are no questions, that people are happy to accept those minutes as a fair and accurate record. I'm seeing nods. Yep, yep. So I think we can take those minutes as accepted, which moves us on to item 4, the action sheet, which is on page 17 of your papers. So I'll ask Rebecca for any update on that, please.
Thank you, Chair. There was only one action outstanding from the last meeting, and that was for members to receive the responses to the last set of recommendations, which you have all now been sent. So unless members have any feedback or comments on those, Chair, I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Any comments from any members in relation to those on the action sheet? Again, I can't see any hands. Okay, which will move us on then to the substantive item, agenda item 5, the initial revenue estimates. The purpose of this report is to provide the Cross-Cutting Resource and Business Overview and Scrutiny Committee with opportunity to review and comment upon the initial 24-25 draft estimates. So I'd welcome to the Chamber all those officers present. We won't go through introductions because it will take a little while. But I'll hand over then to the Executive Member, Councillor Sue Morgan, and the Deputy Chief Executive, Nigel Aurelius, to introduce the report.
Many thanks, Chair and members of the committee, for inviting me to present this report of the Council's revenue estimate for 2024-25 for your scrutiny today. Members are well aware, I'm sure, of the enormous pressures that councils across the UK are facing. It's in the context of an unprecedented combination of national and international events. War in Europe and the Middle East, a cost of living crisis that follows years of underfunding of public services, and rampant inflation that I'm bringing these budget estimates. It's been largely thanks to the continued support of Welsh Government that the Welsh local authority services have been relatively protected in this recent period. However, even given that support, Welsh councils now find themselves facing some horrible choices, and some are even considering, as you will have read, swingeing cuts to essential services. Welsh Government is dealing with a considerable challenge in balancing its own books this year and for future years. And the funding outlook for councils is challenging, given that lack of proposed funding to cover the impacts of inflation and a huge increase in demand for services. So where does that leave our estimates? Well, our service areas have submitted initial 24-25 estimates based upon a steady state continuation of our services. The 23-24 six-month forecast continues to indicate in Torfaen a favourable in-year position, thanks to our service area's strong financial discipline and the expert guidance and support of our corporate finance leads, and I extend my thanks again to them all. Unlike many Welsh councils and Welsh Government itself, our in-year position for 23-24 is stable, and it provides us a helpful buffer to the pressures that are undoubtedly building for next and for future years. But we are not just going to rest on that buffer, so to speak. The initial estimates that you will consider recognise 2.75 million of savings that will be achieved in readiness for 24-25 by our corporate efficiency programme. No mean feat, that. But even despite these efforts, based on anticipated 24-25 funding levels, we still face a projected funding gap which will need to be met through savings or increased revenue. We've been able to hold our council tax increases to the lowest in Wales for a number of years, and we are rightly proud of that. But we cannot do it indefinitely. This report is modelled on revenue-raising assumptions that would narrow, though not entirely close, the gap at this stage. If we're to continue to offer the continuity and excellence of services that we have always done, especially to our most vulnerable residents, we have to make difficult decisions. We have to ensure that the resources to do the job continue to be available. This committee has always provided thorough, productive and considered input to the budget setting process, for which many thanks. I recommend these estimates to you, representing a considered and a responsible way forward, and I look forward to receiving your comments and suggestions. I'll hand over to Nigel and the team to take you through the detail and look forward to receiving your comments.
Thank you, Executive Member. Some introductory comments from me, and then I will take members through the report. Obviously, we had the member seminar on the financial outlook a few weeks ago, and I think members' takeaway from that was that John Ray, Director of Resources at WLGA, was articulating, as the Executive Member has said, the very challenging funding outlook that all local authorities are facing. And a number of local authorities are facing major challenges in the current financial year as well. We've got a lot of uncertainty at the national level, and we await the UK budget, and we've got uncertainty at a Welsh Government budget level as well. And as has been commented on, for the first time, we've seen in-year reductions to some public sector services. We've got rising pay inflation, we've got significant other inflation, and perhaps the situation the public sector is facing is as difficult, if not more so, than through the austerity years. So, in terms of the report before scrutiny today, I'll canter very quickly through it. The first few paragraphs, 4.1, 2 and 3, simply outline the position we believe we are in at, or estimate to be in at month 6, which the Executive Member has already referred to, and we're in a stable position with a very modest, favourable variance at month 6. The purpose of this report is not to go through that, but it does provide a financial context, because that does improve our overall financial standing as an authority, and we're not fighting those fires in 23-24. A significant element of that is we are able to fully fund the pay awards for 23-24, which both helps us in year and helps us going forward. In terms of the estimates before you, the table at 5.2 summarises the initial estimates. As has been said, that they're based on a steady state, so they don't contain service growth or policy choice. For example, there are discussions going on across the council around waste. For example, those growth items won't be included in this steady state. This is as is. And you can see the gap there in terms of the initial estimates. In 5.3, we take members through the key assumptions on which those are built, and they're self-explanatory. In terms of pay, which is always a challenge, more so at the moment, we've built the estimates based on a 3% pay award, but we've also built in a contingency equivalent to a further 1% of pay. I've already referred to the fact that our ability to fund pay in year from the base budget has stood us in good stead so far, and we're trying to make similar assumptions in the current estimates. And the range of other assumptions are there. And then in 5.4, we show the quantification of those. And there's a full trail in Appendix 1. In 5.5, we just bring out the fact that, as is common with many local authorities, we are heavily reliant on grant, and these estimates, these draft estimates for 24-25, contain assumptions of just over £75 million in specific grants. And in the report, you've got an appendix which details where those grants are and the major services. Then in 5.6, we've got the corporate efficiency programme, which we called this time last year Apollo. As the executive members referred to, we've already seen the benefit of that. So we've got the directorate review, where we reduce the number of chief officers. That's yielding a benefit. We've got 2 areas of functional redesign built within the budget. One in relation to admin and business support, and one in relation to adult services reablement, which is going to yield just over 1.8 million. We've got income. We've got an income target of 410,000, and we've indicated the areas we are looking at. Buildings review. We believe we can take out £160,000 worth of money by moving into buildings and out of buildings. We've got 30,000 built in at the moment, and another 130,000 to identify. In terms of energy, both in terms of prices falling and energy efficiency work and behaviours programme, those numbers are also listed there in 5.6. ICT and digital, there's a target there of 139,000, which is built into the estimates and is largely achieved. And then what we also did, we went back through and challenged the initial pressures, and that's given us 537,000, which we could remove from the draft estimates. That exercise yielded pressures that we could remove and some pressures we had to put in. And then, as members will recall, we did underspend in 22-23, so we went back through that, and nearly £500,000 worth of that was recurring that we thought we could build into the 24-25 budget. So the outcomes of all of that was that a total of 5.2 million has been recognised within the initial estimates. And that's largely because we started the process based on the MTFP that was agreed as part of the last budget setting, and we attacked it in earnest. So we really made that work rather than starting it when we had the first draft estimates. The next part of the report is the unhypothecated funding. The most significant element of that is the assumptions around Welsh Government funding. I've already referred to the uncertainty in terms of what is that likely to be. We know in terms of the in-year pressures from the Welsh Government that they've sought to protect local government as far as possible. So we've built these on the forward indication that we had as part of the current year's budget of 3%. That seems to be the most prudent basis at the moment. And then obviously we've made some assumptions around council tax, which are there and articulated within the report. That comes together in terms of a net position of all services of £4.2 million. There's then some commentary in relation to schools. Myself and Jason O'Brien, went and met the head teachers quite early in the process and indicated that Cabinet were minded at that time to fund the pay awards for school as part of the uplift for 24-25. And if that is the case, that would see the school's budget rise by around 4%, which is slightly higher than all other services. That would then leave the schools with just over, around about £1.4 million to address. As I said, we discussed that position with the head teachers early, and they continue to recognise the significant efforts of the council to support the school community. But as we would all say, addressing the remaining financial challenge will still not be easy for them. So that gives a balance at the moment based on, as I say, steady state to be addressed if all those things come to fruition of around £2.8 million, which at this stage in the budget process is a reasonable position to be in, but certainly not an easy one. So in terms of working our way towards then moving that down to a balanced position, we're obviously going back through the estimates, and we've held meetings with all the strategic directors individually. We've got to continue to drive the identified efficiency reviews to make sure we get the maximum from that. And then we will obviously explore whether any further functional reviews can be concluded to bring the budget back into balance. I know I say it during every budget round, so I'll say it at this point in time. We have excellent collective responsibility and corporate working in this council. And I get nothing but support from all the strategic directors and their heads of service in trying to both maintain services, but I'm recognising we've got to balance a budget, which I think is a credit to this council. In terms of risks, we bring those out in 7. I think they're all pretty self-explanatory. That's around the overall level of funding that we can expect from the Welsh Government. The hypothecated funding that we're assuming in relation to specific grants, the fact that we're building these on a steady state, so as we want enhanced services, they will require funding discussions, and obviously pay and general inflation. And we've also got to consider the impact of the Foundation Real Living Wage announcement that was relatively recently announced. The next steps are there in paragraph 8. And they'll all be recognisable to members, and that is basically the report, Chair.
Thank you very much to both Sue and Nigel for giving this summary in relation to the report and the key points. So this is now the opportunity to open up the meeting to all members for any questions that they may have. I see a hand from Councillor Steve Evans.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just need to declare an interest because I'm on South Wales Fire and Rescue, and I'm the chair of their Finance Committee, and I'm also being involved in the process with a levy. So I just need to make sure I put that an interest.
Thank you very much, Councillor Evans. Any other comments? Councillor Best.
Thank you. Looking at the budget we passed in February this year and the working budget, there's a bit of disparity in income in economy and environment for recycling, where income from customers and clients has been underestimated. The initial draft for next year's budget also has the income for this department much lower than the working budget this year. Is this just a way of conservatively estimating income, or are we expecting a drop-off in income in this service area?
Who's going to answer that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Councillor
Rachel.
Best. We try not to be too optimistic when modelling for this sort of income, because it is volatile and dependent on market. So this is the sale of recyclates primarily, so particularly plastic, card, paper, cans, etc. But what we have done is, just looked at what we think is realistic. So for next year, we're confident that the income base can be increased by 100,000 based on not just this year's performance from the market, but previous year's performances as well. So it's conservative, but also realistic. Hope that helps.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, I can see Councillor Slade wishing to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Let me just find it. In Appendix 3, it gives a breakdown of the expected or forecast grant funding, primarily from Welsh Government. It only gives the estimates for 24-25. I think it would have been helpful if we'd had what we actually were awarded in 23-24. So my question basically is, the total that we were estimating for next year is 75.4 million. What did we actually get for this year?
Who's going to take that one? Dave.
It's broadly the same, Councillor Slade, the levels. What we can do, we'll recreate this appendix with this year's figures on and recircle it back around here.
That'd be great, thank you.
Okay.
Great. In the chamber, Councillor Lucy Williams.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a little bit of further understanding, looking at the corporate efficiency programme on 5.61.2 on functional redesign. Just interesting to see that the two identified areas with the review of adult services and admin and business support. So looking at the adult services, the kind of savings, hopefully, given that that's quite a long projected programme, is there a way of roughly working out when you'd look to see those savings happening? Just a little bit of understanding about how that's worked out.
David Leach is going to answer that one, I think.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Williams. Yes, the savings that are identified as part of that programme are all intended to be saved next financial year. So members who are on the Healthier Scrutiny Committee will have had the opportunity last week to talk through the broader programme. It's a combination, as members on that committee will be aware, of vacancy reductions, which will be removed straight away, some changes within the broader staffing base, and savings that will come from a reduction in the size of packages. The figures that you presented with there are all intended to be realised next financial year.
Thank you.
I think Nigel would like to add a little.
Can I just add to that? I mean, Dave is able to confidently say that because we've been seriously working at some of these areas since we set the last budget, and I think that's a significant change, perhaps, to previous budget rounds and MTFPs. And the challenge now going forward will be, as soon as we start to feel comfortable that we've got 2024-25 balanced or near the balance, to start identifying those areas for 25-26, so that, and even beyond, so that when we set the budget in February, we've already got those ideas that we're looking at, so that we can be confident this time next year to say the same on whatever programme it is next year. So that's one of the benefits of starting early.
Thank you.
You happy with that? Yep. Okay, great. Looking around for more hands? Well, I'll come in with a question of my own then, perhaps, if that's okay. So looking at 5.4 in the report, you mentioned in the bullet point that general inflationary increases across all service areas of 4.3 million. Is that predicated on a 3% increase, or how is that estimated? That's part one. And the second part, the bullet point below that, the demand for services, whether there's any estimate as to where those service demands may fall that has led to the consideration of that figure.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. The inflation varies depending on the area, so it will be very much linked to advice and discussion with the heads of service, so it'll vary. But where we're doing anything that's general inflation, which is mainly perhaps on the school side, we've used a figure of about 3.25%, because that's, getting too boring, linked to the Bank of England forecast for inflation for the next financial year. In terms then of the demand, again, that sort of varies across the piece, and there's, in Appendix 1, it's detailed by each service. So.
Thank you for that. I'm looking to see if there's any more hands. Don't be shy, you know, feel free to ask a question. There are no stupid questions, as I'm told. Councillor Slade, and then I see another hand above him as well. So Councillor Slade, please.
Yeah, again from Appendix 3, I see that next year the overall net expenditure is going up something 11.9 million, yet the grant funding grant funding and income is going down by 8.4 million. My concern is that obviously grant funding is generally given or provided for discretionary services, and my concern is that we are simply transferring the sort of, like, you know, the expenditure for these discretionary services onto our budget, where instead I think we should be looking to make savings where the grants are being cut. That's where the savings need to be made. That's just my observation, if you like. I'd be grateful for any comments.
Thank you. I think the summary there was sort of looking at the cuts, tying to cuts or reductions in grant. So I think Dave Lilly may be looking to respond to that one.
Sorry, Councillor, I'm struggling to see where you're referencing the reduction in grants. Councillor Slade?
Well, it was income, really. In Appendix 3, at the on the bottom, the summary, it shows the sort of net variance of 11.9 million, but that's almost entirely taken up by in the net expenditure. Last year's net was 223. This year, forecast net next year is 234. But the grants and income is going down. It's estimated to go down from 127 million to 118.9 million.
Yeah. So the income figures for this year, Councillor Slade, would include one-off grants or grants that are ending, as you said, about specific projects, which haven't been replicated through into the initial drafts for 24-25, but also the corresponding cost pressure for those who have been taken out. And then it's just various ups and downs around there, around recognition of what we think is true income levels and taking it forward into these estimates.
Yeah, I think my point is, if you've got a team of people working on a project and the funding for that project gets pulled, those people should be made redundant because there's no money for them. My fear is that we are thinking, well, those people are doing a good job, we'll simply pay for it out of the revenue budget, out of the net budget, out of the council's money. If you see what I'm saying.
I think I would, challenge the overall assumption that every grant is for discretionary services.
Really?
Because what we've seen over recent years is there are a number of core services, for example, the Sustainable Waste Management Grant, without which we wouldn't be providing a refuge service. There's a number of housing grants like that, and there are quite a through social care. The principle may have started in terms of discretionary services, but there are a number of significant grants, particularly in education as well, that are now underpinning core services, and I think if Welsh Government were here, they would also recognise that. But in terms of when a grant ends, our policy isn't simply to just absorb it then within the revenue budget. Our policy is to challenge that and ask ourselves the question, are they providing core services? Do the council want to keep those services going, or are they services that can collapse and be reduced? And it will be a combination of those when grants get reduced. We don't simply, because the grant is reduced, simply absorb it in. But as I say, there are a number of grants in there that are now funding core services.
In addition to that, Councillor Slade, the reduction in the income, part of that is in 23-24, we obviously funded the high inflationary increases on energy from reserves. So that was recognised as income in 23-24. For 24-25, we've removed that reserve usage. So that would be 1.5 million of that reduction as well. Okay.
Okay.
Are you content there, Councillor Slade?
Well, you learn something new every day. I had no idea that core services were an optional sort of expenditure for the Welsh Government. I thought they would be fully funded, but there you are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Best?
Thank you. It's been in the news recently about the uplifting councillor pay to about 6.1%. Looking at last year's working budget of about 1.2 million, applying the 6.1% uplift to that still leaves us about 20 grand short. So I wonder, on members' allowances and expenses, whether there is a foreseen increase or whether that figure is more nuanced than just the allowances that members take.
Okay, is Dave Lilly going to respond?
Yeah, Councillor Best, the allowances that we've built in for members for 24-25 recognise the national awards that have been published.
Has that covered that, Councillor Best, or is there further point of clarification?
Yeah, it's just that it has 1,199,790, and the remuneration panel has an uplift of 6.05%, and that would leave you with an increase of 72,587, which would still leave you 20 grand short of the forecasted expenditure for next year. So I'm just wondering if that figure includes something other than just allowances, or if there is an increase in expenses expected.
I'll have to come back to you, Councillor Best, on that.
Okay, thank you. It may well be that it's from a different draft or something like that. I'm not sure, but thank you.
Okay, that's helpful. I think that would be welcome, David. Okay, any other further questions? If I perhaps take the opportunity to ask a further question myself then, which is at 5.6.1.3, C, there's mention of a new approach to income setting, and looking at where fees have not been uplifted. I wondered if there's, at this point, recognising we're fairly in the process, any areas for potential review that you've started to look at in relation to this, or whether this is a generic exercise.
Thanks, Councillor Williams. Well, Finance have let me do a little bit of work on this, which is a bit worrying, isn't it? Yeah, Nigel's nodding. So what we've been looking at, again, in that whole paragraph is the 4 areas. So we've looked again, like Councillor Best asked earlier, about the recycling income. So where a service has been continually exceeding its income levels, but it hasn't been properly budgeting for, we're doing a bit of a rebaselining. So that's quite an easy one. Then, we do recognise, and this is probably something which, we're still in development stage on Project B, is a general uplift, is that what's happened in the past is that we review all the pressures, the revenue expenditure over the summer leading to this report today. Sometimes income is done with that, sometimes it isn't. And what we are just working on, in fact, it's being discussed in leadership team tomorrow, is actually we should be doing the 2 at the same time, sort of going back to Councillor Slade's point earlier. Absolutely. Now, for all of the fees and charges for which we have complete discretion over, so I'll give a good example. We cannot, by law, change the planning application fee, that's set in statute, but we can, for example, be discretionary over our pre-application charges. So that's an example. So the target here, about 90,000, would equate to about 2% uplift of all those for which we have discretion over. 1% is about £45,000. We are looking at having a better process behind this, a complete register, and then looking at what the uplift process should be in terms of, as Councillor Slade has pointed out, if there's inflationary costs for grants, etc., making sure that those costs are covered. But also importantly, that where we do have charges, that we have a robust public policy position for those whoever is receiving the service, whether or not it be businesses or the public, etc. So there's a really open and transparent, so the level of service they can expect. So that is something which has been coming forward. Then, I suppose, option C, there's linking to that general uplift a bit. They've been sort of like merged together, so it's at a point in time. But there have been a few areas where fees have been quite static. There was some sort of like over 10 years old. Well, the cost of increasing that service, and obviously that's then a creep of subsidisation by the council. So again, just looking at those. And then deep dives. The recycling was one of those, actually, in terms of that baselining. What is it we can take forward? But we are just concluding some work in asset management in terms of our commercial estate and what that can bring in. And there's also been some discussion of some of the other bigger income generating services as well, just to see how that can be taken forward.
Okay, thank you for that. And I trust then, obviously, that will be fed forward into the next stages of budget planning.
It will, yes.
Thank you. Sorry, members, any other questions? Councillor Steve Evans?
Yeah, the question I would like to ask, what would we do if the settlement is lower or even higher than we anticipated, and what would we look at to alleviate them predicaments?
I won't be too worried if it's higher. I mean, if it's lower, as the report refers to, depending on how much it's lower, I will then have to be sitting down with each of the strategic directors, asking them to go further in terms of coming up with options for members. At this moment in time, we've had no indication from the Welsh Government that it will be lower. It seems a reasonable working assumption. But if it is, then we'll be sitting down as a collective and see what we can do to manage that. If it's higher, of course, that will then be into the member arena in terms of how they wish to see that used.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Evans? I think that's a reassurance if we were.
Yeah, it's just a hypothetical question, you know, just to, if we did go either way, that was all. But yeah, no, that's great, thanks.
Great. Councillor Haynes?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. I don't even know if it's a question, to be honest with you. Welsh Government are doing a review of council tax banding due to start April 2025. I'm wondering how that is, if there is sort of any, if you've had any early thoughts on how that will affect the budget a year April, and are we sort of considering anything this year that may deflect from any issues that might raise or not might raise, because it might have the opposite effect maybe. Just sort of some general idea of what, you know, what we are thinking with that proposed change that Welsh Government are bringing in a year April.
Nigel, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a good point, Councillor Haynes. But I mean, I think it's too early to really get into considering it. I mean, basically, the situation is at the moment that the Welsh Government have just today launched a consultation on revisions to council tax, which we need to look and work through. But one thing that they have been clear about all along is that the review of council tax is aimed at making the council tax system fairer and is not aimed at raising extra revenue. So what will happen in its very simplest terms, the impact of the revaluations could have an impact on individual authorities' ability to raise council tax, and then that will similarly have to be replicated by the overall revenue support grant that underpins local authorities. So my understanding would be that if, for example, an authority suddenly is able to raise less from council tax, then their revenue support grant from Welsh Government should go up. And vice versa. So there should be, and I know these things are all theoretical, no overall impact in terms of our overall funding. Where the impact will be felt, though, of course, will be in relation to council taxpayers themselves, both positively and otherwise. I don't know whether that's helped, but it's early stages. Certainly when
a little bit, Nigel. It's helped a little bit because it was good to hear that if we lose in one respect, it will be increased in another, because that was my worry moving forward, that potentially Torfaen could lose that because of the value of the properties, the income levels in Torfaen being one of the poorer in Wales. So I was a little bit concerned, but thanks for that.
No, they would have to cushion that, otherwise it would be unfair and disproportionate against Wales. And they've been clear that's not the intention, behind any of this, and that was the case in the previous revaluation.
Okay, I see no hands. I'll just do one little question of my own then. Apologies. 713 under risks. You've mentioned about the estimates being based on a steady state recovery, and if any enhanced services are required or new responsibilities are transferred to council without funding a challenged process. Really just to ask if you think there is anything on the horizon, or whether this is very much a kind of catch-all risk.
It's in part a catch-all, because that can always happen. But it also points out, I mean, there are discussions going on across the council around service changes and service enhancements. So it's also recognising that point, that if those policy choices result in the potential for extra resource, then at the moment these estimates don't consider it, and therefore we'd have to consider that funding and how we fund it. So partly a catch-all and partly in relation to discussions that are taking place.
Thank you very much. So, any other member questions? I see no hands, so I think we don't need to prolong this unnecessarily. So, everybody happy that they've had the opportunity to ask any questions? Because obviously what we'll now ask is that the officers now are free to leave, as well as the executive member. So are you all content with that, members? And then we can consider any recommendations. Thank you very much to all the officers for responses and for attending today. And just reminding that we are still on camera. Okay, colleagues, I can now advise that the officers and the executive member have now left the meeting, so it's our opportunity for recommendations for consideration by Cabinet, and including any suggestions around mitigations. And Rebecca, any initial points you've picked up you'd like to highlight for members?
Thank you, Chair. Members, I didn't note down any particular recommendations. I did note down 2 action points. The first one was regards to Councillor Slade's point about updating the appendix with regards to the grant funding, and Dave did say that he would recirculate that. And then there was an action point with regards to Councillor Best's query on members' expenses uplift. And again, Dave said he would get back to you on that. So other than those action points, members, did you have any specific recommendations you'd like to put forward? Do I take it that you're satisfied to endorse the initial estimate?
I think Councillor Evans was going to say something. Sorry.
Yeah, I would like to ask if the settlement is not and it's lower than expected, and we're looking to make efficiency of savings, to make sure that any cuts to staff or services is not perilous to our statutory duties.
Point taken, and we've noted that. Did I see a hand from Councillor Haynes?
Yes, thank you. Just a little concerned at the level of the proposed council tax that I can't say I won't support it at this time, but I am. It's significantly higher than last year. I understand there's also sort of some raft of redundancies, and that also concerns me. Maybe the recommendation is that those redundancy levels are looked at, see if there's an alternative solution.
I think that at this stage, obviously, with budget setting and things to still come, like the autumn statement and the final budget setting, any detail can't really be determined until then. But obviously, it's prudent and also a statutory requirement to give notice if there are likely to be any actions taken. I'll see if any officers would like to come in on that.
Sorry, I need to sort of say, Councillor Haynes, obviously it's difficult to make a recommendation on that basis, as that wasn't particularly discussed through the meeting, where officers could come back and give you further information on that. But perhaps if I just note your concerns down in the comments section, would that be okay?
Yes, please, because I don't particularly want to endorse the whole report when I've still got concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's noted. Thank you. Are you okay with that, Councillor Haynes? Yep.
Yes, that's fine.
Did I see another hand from Councillor Slade, or? He's put it down. Okay.
No, yeah, I put it down. It's okay.
Okay. So I think, colleagues, I can see no hands. So are we content to go forward with the noting the actions and points that Rebecca has outlined to us? Are you all content with that at this stage? Given, obviously, we're through a process of scrutinising the budget. I think that's a yes. So in which case, I think the formal part of the meeting is now over. We'll obviously take the summary of actions from this committee. And then I think we can move on to item 6, which is the date and time of next meeting, which is Wednesday, the 6th of December 2023, where members will be asked to scrutinise the Strategic Equality Plan. Can I thank everybody for their contributions and wish you the best for the remainder of the day. Thank you.